Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Before we get into the meat of this story, I want to give some context about my views and opinions on this. I have made many videos on subjects very similar to this, and I've always maintained that anyone who aids or covers up or ignores the things that have happened knowingly should stand in the dock next to the person who committed the crime. This particular crime is rather a heinous crime. It involves very young people. The person who committed it is in a position of trust. And the person who committed it, they had a boss who was told about this. The allegations were made, and this person ignored them and tried to cover it up, presumably to save the good name and reputation of, in this case, a school. We've all heard stories of the NHS basically covering up the R of women in hospital because they don't want to admit that they're putting biological men in women's wards. And in cases like that, I think the chief executive of the hospital should stand in the dock next to the man who committed the crime and should receive the same sentence. If you started doing that, there'd be a lot less of it. Well, here we have a teacher, head teacher, who's just been struck off because she did nothing about a teacher who was committing some terrible acts and turned a blind eye and then basically allowed it to happen. Well, have a look at the story, but it is enough to make me very angry. So if I do get a bit shouty in it, I've warned you, and please forgive me in advance. I'm sure it will make you angry too. Here goes. So, head teacher struck off after ignoring allegations about a PD teacher at a primary school. Angela Patterson ignored serious allegations over Carol Ann White, 40, and her relationship with a schoolboy. And he was we're not talking a 16-year-old here, we're talking very young. And there she is. This is a sick, degenerate woman who has been found guilty of some of the most serious crimes against children. And her boss, the head teacher of that school, was told about it and turned a blind eye and did nothing. That head teacher needs to be in jail, needs to be found guilty of, guilty after the fact. Basically, it is a crime. They are guilty after the fact, and they should be treated exactly the same as the perpetrators of the crime. So a head teacher has been struck off after she failed to act on concerns over a staff member who was later jailed for abusing pupils. Angela Patterson ignored serious allegations over Carol Ann White and her relationship with a schoolboy. Patterson had been in charge of North Lanarkshire Primary School when White targeted the youngster. Now, I've done an awful lot on North Lanarkshire recently, but that's all SNP related. So it just goes, this isn't one of those videos. This isn't an SNP video, but what it goes to show is if you're living in North Lanarkshire, you've just got rid of a sort of a sexually abusing counsellor who's likely to be replaced with someone who commits GBH quite a bit. And meanwhile, your schools are filled with people like this. Honestly, North Lanarkshire, you need to consider doing something about the people running your authority. Anyway, Patterson had been in charge of a North Lanarkshire primary school. So that was the clue there. Primary school. When White targeted the youngster. We're not talking a high school here. We're not talking 15, 16-year-old boys. White was later arrested following a huge police investigation which revealed she had abused two boys at two different schools. She was convicted of 2 charges of engaging in sexual activity with the youngsters and possessing indecent photos of a child at Airdrie Sheriff Court between August 2018 and May 2020. White of Uddingston in Lanarkshire was jailed for 3 years and placed on the SO's register indefinitely. And in fact, that is how all people who commit these kind of crimes, none of this, you're on the register for 5 years or you're on the register for 10 years. No, you're on the register for the rest of your life. And 3 years for this in prison, she'd have done 18 months, she'd be out. No way. That woman needs to have seen 20, 30 years. Plenty enough time to consider her actions, and it sends a message to others. But of course, Patterson, the head mistress of this school, needed also to get the same term. Give her 30 years as well for failing to expose it, for covering it up. Patterson has admitted failing in her duties as head teacher and child protection coordinator by not acting on the claims about White. At the General Teaching Council for Scotland, she admitted a string of errors in her handling of allegations between 2015 and 2019. This woman was prosecuted for things she did between 2018 and 2020, but the allegations came out in 2015, 3 years prior, and this head teacher did nothing. This head teacher has caused this to happen to children. This head teacher is guilty. Patterson needs to go to jail. She doesn't need to be struck off. She needs to go to prison for a long time. A disciplinary panel ruled they had no option but to strike her off after concluding she was unfit to teach. She's unfit as a human being. What kind of human being allows this thing to happen to children? She is not human. She needs to be prisoned for the rest of her life. This is disgusting. Anyway, in a letter to the GTCS, Patterson said, "My action or lack of action regarding this situation has caused me to reflect critically on my role, and I am anxious to resolve this as best I can." Well, 30 years thinking about it should be fine. And I am willing to work with the NLC to ensure that this never happens again. But it will, and it will keep happening while people are not being sent to prison when they know about it. If you were to put this head teacher in prison for 30 years, the next head teacher will be watching every one of those teachers like a hawk. I can clearly see that I could have and should have been more proactive in addressing the concerns shared by staff, and I had read the notes available to me. So other staff, plural, many concerns, not just one word. The fact is she's admitting that there were several times people had come and said to her, and still she did nothing. I would certainly have taken a different course of action had I known I would lose my job. You'd have taken a far quicker course of action had you been facing 30 years in prison. And this is why I say things like this require massive prison sentences, and not just for the person who does the crime, but for those who fail to act upon it. Patterson admitted to the GTCS she failed to read written concerns about White from colleagues, which included the use of the word grooming, and also provided White with an excellent reference despite her new school being attended by vulnerable youngsters. She also let White return to the school after she had changed job and failed to notify the parents of the boy whose relationship with White had raised concern. This head teacher is also a groomer because she has allowed this to happen. This head teacher is an awful human being. She is as guilty of these crimes as White. Patterson and White should be seen as a pair because they are no different from Burke and bloody Hare as far as these kids are concerned. During a 7-day trial last year, it emerged White had kissed the 11-year-old boy at the school in a store cupboard before she changed jobs, and the court heard how her web of deceit finally unravelled during the first COVID-19 lockdown in 2020. A total of 1,185 messages were exchanged between her and a 12-year-old boy in just 3 weeks. White asked him to touch himself intimately on FaceTime, sent revealing photos of herself, and sent one photo captioned, you can read that, "Cop block of the year goes to COVID-19. She is talking to a 12-year-old boy. The head teacher of the school knew these things were happening and did nothing. In a written ruling, the GTCS said the panel considered that the teacher's conduct fell significantly short of the standards expected of a registered teacher, and that her conduct was incompatible with her remaining on the register. And for these reasons, the panel concluded that the teacher is currently unfit to teach. It could only direct that the teacher be removed from the register. Patterson will be unable to reapply to work as a teacher for 2 years. So in 2 years' time, Patterson, a woman who allowed this to happen to several children, who knew about it, who actually actively encouraged it, could be back teaching your children in 2 years' time. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about a teacher like that teaching your children in 2 years' time? A teacher who considers it okay for a grown woman to do these things to a child. Unbelievable, isn't it? Well, I think they should we've got the picture of White. I think we should see the pictures of Patterson. We should be told where Patterson lives. Everybody should be told exactly what Patterson is, and then she can present herself to the police and beg to be put into prison for the next 30 years because she is just an animal. And I'm done. I've got to come up because I can feel bile rising, and I've done very well in not getting angry on this one. Who, seriously, would hear these allegations from several sources and would not at least investigate it, would not at least raise it as an issue, would not ask that person in for a meeting and say, right, these allegations have been made, and look them in the eye as you're laying out the allegations? Why didn't she even hand it over to the police? Even if she couldn't feel comfortable in doing it herself, a simple phone call to the police. That's all it would have taken. And yet this head teacher, Patterson, decided that she didn't want to know. It was too uncomfortable for her. She thought, no, if I ignore it, the problem will go away. Well, now the problem hasn't gone away. The problem has come back. And I hope the parents of these children sue her personally for damages, that she loses everything she has, her home, possessions, everything. And as she's handing it over, she can take great comfort in the knowledge that at least she's making some reparation for the appalling decisions she's made. Although personally I think she should be making these decisions from the inside of a cell. She should have got the same punishment as White. But anyway, it is there. And it just happens so often, time and time again. These people who are supposedly looking after your children are doing nothing but. And I've always said, if you've got the resources, keep your children out of schools, because the schools are just filled with degenerate filth. You only have to look at all the things they're teaching them, all this sex education now, the pushing of identity politics, the getting of drag artists into school. You're seeing them asking children as young as 6 and 5 even how they identify sexually, how they touch themselves. They're talking about 6-year-olds and talking about pleasuring their anuses. This is what's going on in schools these days. Is it any wonder people think that the teaching profession are all pervs and groomers? And here we are, more evidence that yes, they seem to be. I shall stop there and I shall finish, and I shall say thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see here on the channel, please hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video, but mostly leave a like. It helps. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, for God's sake, guard your children with your life, and goodbye.